After 2 weeks away, the Carolina Hurricanes are back to defend home ice at the Lenovo Center against the Vegas Golden Knights. On today's show, we're going to be talking about reactions to Monday's lines at practice. Also going to do some injury updates as well for a few of the guys. And then we get to preview the Hurricanes against the Golden Knights for Tuesday night's matchup. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Tuesday episode of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about short Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Searchcast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Like I said at the top of the show today, we're going to be talking about Monday's practice lines, get a reaction out of that, and give my thoughts overall of what we've seen there. Also going to do some injury updates as well as we get some news about Keandre Miller, Jacob Slavin, Shane Gostisbehere, and everyone else that is going on following the practice from Monday. And then we get to preview the Hurricanes and the Golden Knights game on Tuesday night. But before we jump into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, if you're on the YouTube side of things, you see the background is a little bit different. I am in a hotel because we are officially on vacation. So throughout the week, you're going to probably see some different locales for me doing the podcast, but the grind never stops. Regardless of his vacation, you will still get an episode of Locked On Hurricanes as we talk about your Carolina Hurricanes throughout the week, where they're playing the Vegas Golden Knights and, of course, the Islanders and then the Boston Bruins and all that stuff. But Monday, the Hurricanes had practice after having Sunday off following their 2-week trip. That saw them go 4-2, which is what you really love to see overall, the fact they're dealing with a lot of injuries. Now, the Monday lines, of course, this was provided by Walt Ruff. You had Nikolai Ehlers, Sebastian Aho, Seth Jarvis, along with Taylor Hall, Logan Stankovic, and Jackson Blake, Andrei Svechnikov, Jordan Staal, Jordan Martin, and then it was Mark Jankowski, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and Bradley Nadeau. So no real differences to the forward cores, just the fact that, we're like, so we'll talk about more of the injuries in segment 2, but those were your forward lines look like. Same thing from their game against the Dallas Stars. Nothing real different there. It'll be interesting to see how the forward core does. I mean, you still get the fact that Sebastian Aho is on an 8-game point streak. Ehlers is on a 3-game point streak. Unfortunately, Jarvis lost his 7-gamer, but the way he's playing right now, it's no surprise how good he's been, so that's no different there. Same second line that's been rolling pretty much the back half of that road trip with Hall, Stankovic, and Blake. They've been doing really well together. I think that's going to be a second line that's it's still going to be very sneaky good for the Hurricanes as we go down the stretch, and just the fact that the start Hall has really put into a good spot. He is top 5 on the team in points. So it makes sense of why you're going to have him with Jackson Blake, who's also top 5 on the team in points, and Logan Stankovic is right there with those guys. Third line, obviously, it's going to be the Jordans of Staal and Martinook. Andre did move up to the third line only because of the fact that Carey is out. So if it wasn't for the fact that Carey was out, he would probably still be fourth line with his very slow start to the season. And then, obviously, you're going to have KK as your center, Mark Jankowski slots, so because of Eric Robinson's injury, and, of course, with the most recent call-up with Bradley Nadeau, still kind of acclimating him into the lineup, getting some more ice time. And, like I said, from what we're hearing with the injuries to Carey and Robinson, it looks like Nadeau might be up for a little bit longer. I'd be curious to see if the Hurricanes do just let him keep playing up here on the fourth line, and maybe he just gets more ice time as the games go on, or maybe they feel like there might be a change somewhere, so we're still not sure. But for me personally, I hope the Hurricanes just keep Nadeau up at this point, because I think he's done enough in Chicago to be like, why keep him down there? When he, in 3 games with the Wolves here, he had 2 goals and 4 points. He scored a lacrosse goal Like, yeah, he's still really young. He's 20 years old, but it's like you can tell his shot is age already. And I think, yeah, there's still some more stuff you can work with him on. But at this point, just get the experience in the NHL and just go from there. Now, defensively, you got Mike Riley with Sean Walker, no different there. Those guys have been paired together for the back half of the road trip. They were playing very well as they went on, so not surprising as your top pair. Shane Gostisbehere is back, and he's with Jalen Chatfield. Ghost wasn't a regular practice jersey. Thankfully, he was not in a no contact. And then you got Alexander Nikishin with Joel Nystrom, and then Dominic Fensore, who was called up. Sunday is, the seventh defenseman with the team, and then, of course, in goal, you have Anderson, Bussy, and Pierre Kochetkov, who's back as well. So you were running with three goalies. Funny enough, I did not realize that, because the fact that you saw Joel Nystrom kind of slide into the left side, I didn't realize that he was also playing on his offhand. Joel Nystrom's a right shot, just like Charles Alexis Legault, and that makes sense of why they probably sent Legault down, because the fact he was averaging 12 minutes a game when Joel Nystrom was playing almost 17. And now you slot him on the right side. You put Alexander Nikishin. You keep Nikishin on the left. You put Ghost back on the left. And then you got so you have three left shots and three right shots now with Riley Walker, Ghost Chatfield, Nikishin, Nystrom, which makes sense. It is a little bit surprising for me, though, for the fact that you throw Ghost back on the left side, especially with the fact of how good him and Nikishin were to start the season. But it makes sense when you do have Nystrom, who's a right shot. You don't want to have a weird balance of where you have a right shot on the left and a left shot on the right. It's just easier to have them on their natural side. So now you got 3 and 3, and then you got, you have Fensore on as your seventh defenseman, but it's also good to see you got Pierre Kochetkov back. Of course, we'll have some, like I said, injury updates in the second part of the show, but that's kind of what you're looking at in terms of your lines going into the game on Tuesday night, or tonight, whenever everyone listens to the show, is that these are mostly 99.9% going to be your lines going into this game. And it's, like I said, the forward core is basically the same from the Dallas game. Defensively, it's just a little bit different for the fact that, Legault is back with Chicago because he got, reassigned. Then you brought up Dominic Fensore as your seventh. Now, like I said, then you got Ghost Chatfield, Nikishin, Nystrom as your second and third pairs. Fensore is your seventh. But Riley Walker together makes sense. They've been playing phenomenal together for the most part, especially on that back end of that road trip, logging a lot of minutes. Great defensively. It makes sense. And now you got three goalies with Anderson, Bussy, and Kochetkov. Now, with that whole situation is the fact that, Brandon Bussy is waiver eligible, or he is waiver eligible. So if you're the Hurricanes, even if Piotr is 100% ready to come back as a backup right now, or if he's not, I would say it's probably not a good idea to put Bussy on waivers, because it seems that the way he's playing right now, a lot of teams could make a case to claim him back, especially Florida. So this might be a situation where the Hurricanes might just have to carry three goalies for however long it's going to be. It could be for a good part of the season. Who really knows? But the way Brandon Bussy's been playing, and I wouldn't even put that Dallas game on him for the most. Like, the three goals were as a deflection and two own goals off of your own guys. So, I mean, that's a game where Brandon Bussy basically kept the Hurricanes in. So it wouldn't make sense to get rid of him at any point in terms of trying to send him down to Chicago, because I think almost any team would probably pick him up. So you could be seeing three goalies, even if Piotr was 100% or not. You just got to have to figure that out as if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, and of course, with Rod and Paul Schoenfelder is, who do you run with as your starter and who is your backup for some of these games, especially since this week alone, you're talking Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday as your games. But like I said, most likely these are your lines, forward core staying the same. You get Ghost in there, he slots back in, and then you got, Nystrom with Nikishin, and then now you got Dominic Fensore as your seventh. And you kind of just roll with that and see where you go. I think for the Hurricanes, for the most part, did pretty well against Dallas. They're up 2-0, and then unfortunately, Dallas gets back in and on some friendly fire, which is one of those things. So you guys would go from there and see what happens. But those are your lines. It makes sense where you're looking at, especially on the defense, 3 lefts, 3 rights, 4 core, no real changes need to happen there because, certain guys still need to, get some ice time and some still need to, step up and see what happens from there. Now, all that to be said, we did get some injury updates following practice on Monday for a certain number of those guys that are either going to be back or still going to be some, staying away a little bit longer, unfortunately. So stick around and we'll talk about that here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Let's be honest. Most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leave money on the table. That's why people start using Monarch. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch's visual dashboard smart tools make it so much easier to understand where your money is going and how to make it work harder for you. So don't let the financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. All right, so we talked about the lines following the practice, and now we're going to talk about the post-practice health updates that the team got from Rod Brind'Amour. Of course, this is courtesy of Walt Ruff. Shane Gostisbehere, who was out with a lower body injury, could return as soon as the game on Tuesday against the Vegas Golden Knights, and they're all saying it's depending on how he's comfortable following the practice with the team on Monday. So while he was slotted in the lineup, it's still a little bit of a TBD, but I think 99.9% chance we probably could see Ghost back against Vegas, but it does leave that 0.1% of maybe he will be out. We will definitely see come warm-ups and stuff like that. Pierre Kochetkov, who did practice with the team, dealing with a lower body injuries very, very soon. He could be an option as a possible backup during the Vegas game, but it is also not a guarantee. So both him and Ghost are TBDs against Vegas. Kendra Miller, also dealing with a lower body injury, is close to return, but is not expected to play against Vegas, but he's around the corner, as Rod Brind'Amour puts it. Now, this is where the unfortunate part starts kicking in. Jacob Slavin, also dealing with a lower body injury, is still, quote, still a little ways away, unquote. So, obviously, the Hurricanes and especially Rod Brind'Amour don't like to put timetables on guys' returns, where we know some players could be out 4 to 6 weeks, 3 to 4 months. With Jacob Slavin, it's still a little ways away, and that could be 2 weeks from now. This could be a month or more away. So who really knows with that? But that is the unfortunate part. You are still without Jacob Slavin. They did say there will be no surgery needed for William Carey, who's dealing with a lower body injury, or Eric Robinson, who's dealing with an upper body injury, but they are still expected to be out a long time. And that's where the real unfortunate part kicks in, because William Carey was doing pretty well in that third line with the Jordans, and for the fact that Eric Robinson was also doing pretty well for the Carolina Hurricanes in terms of, putting up some goals, had a couple assists and stuff like that. And you're going to miss, his big body for the physicality, his great passes that he was putting on for the team as well, and the fact that his speed on that fourth line was really huge for the Hurricanes. And now you're kind of losing his combination of what he can do for the team. Like I said, in terms of just physicality, speed, hockey IQ, you're missing that. And still saying it's a long time, that puts the Hurricanes in a bad spot, because now you're losing a guy you would love to have on your fourth line, or, if you need to move him up at some point, you could do that. But as of now, Robinson's going to be out for a good bit, and so is William Carey, who you really like for his physicality as well. He fits really well with that third line with the Jordans, and now you're without him as well. And that's why you're seeing, the fact that Mark Jankowski is on the wing on the fourth line. That's why you'll see Bradley Nadeau up as a call-up. And as of right now, there are no forward extras. The Hurricanes have no extra guys on the forward core. They have 12 forwards right now that are essentially with the team. Outside of Carey and Robinson being out, there's no healthy scratches for the forwards. You have an extra goalie and a seventh defenseman. That's all you got for your extras. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens for the Carolina Hurricanes on the forward front as well, because now you got to hope that no one is really going to be out. Because if you get another injury, you're down an extra forward, and you're going to have to call someone else up from Chicago, whether that's Joseph Robitaille, Giovanni Smith, Josiah Slavin, maybe Ryan Suzuki. You got to hope that knock on wood that doesn't happen. But that's kind of where you're at right now. That there are really no extras in terms of the Carolina Hurricanes. And you look at the defense, like I said, you are still without Keandre Miller. That could be one game. He could be back for the Thursday game against the Islanders. He could be back for the Saturday game against the Bruins. Who really knows? So we'll see where that is. And, Jacob Slavin is still a little ways away. Like I said, it could be 2 weeks. It could be a month. We're not really sure. And that's why you see the fact that, you got Mike Riley on the top pair, which I don't think anyone had an idea that Mike Riley would be a top pair defenseman who came in as your seventh D-man. If he did come in, you'd think he'd be sliding on the third pair, which he did for a little bit. But he's been, like I said, he's been playing really well with Sean Walker, and I think that's why the Hurricanes really trusted having him up there on that top pairing and getting a lot of minutes because of what he can do. But that's also why you see Joel Nystrom sliding in the lineup as one of your defensemen as well, and that's why you also see Dominic Fensore being your seventh. You're down to your eighth and ninth defenseman, and then I think if you count Legault as well, he's been a recent guy. You're down to your eighth, ninth, and 10th defensemen on your depth chart. But it does go to show how good the Carolina Hurricanes are, in the fact that what Cam Abbott and Spyro Anastasios has done is get these guys ready, because they're the same system. They play the same system in Chicago, but they've got these guys so ready they can just come to Carolina and do what they need to do for the Hurricanes, and you feel good enough to feel like you can throw them in there, and now you're throwing them into the deep end. It's still going to be a learning curve, but you can still rely on what they've done in Chicago, so you feel pretty good about that. But it's crazy to think that you're talking going into Game 9 on Tuesday night for the Hurricanes, that you're down to your 8th, 9th, and 10th defenseman in your depth chart, in your quintessential 7th D-man that you signed in the offseason is playing top pairing minutes with Sean Walker, because you are without Jacob Slavin, and you want to have a balance of lefts and rights. But Riley has stepped up, and that's the one good thing about the Hurricanes is the next man up mentality. Everyone's pulling on the same rope, and I think Riley is not getting talked about enough for the fact of what he's had to do for the Hurricanes to put himself into this position, and the fact that he's doing well enough to garner trust from the Hurricanes, especially from Tim Gleason, the defense coach, and obviously Ron Brind'Amour, to get that opportunity to be top pairing and get in those minutes and being relied on a lot to do what he needs to do. So that's kind of where you're at in terms of that aspect. So, but the fact that the Hurricanes are where they're at in terms of their depth of using those guys, but they've done pretty well, things considered, to go down to a 10th defenseman to be where they're at. Forward core wise, I mean, you're down to your essentially 14th forward in Brind'Amour Nadeau, because Jankowski's your 13th because he was your extra. Now he's in. You got to call up Brind'Amour Nadeau, who's essentially your 14th forward. He's into the lineup now, and he's played one game, but he almost had a goal against Dallas. If that puck goes in and doesn't go off the crossbar, that game is completely different. And everyone's celebrating Bradley's first NHL goal, which I think he'll get one very soon. It could be against Vegas, it could be against the Islanders, who knows? But that's how close he is. But then it makes you start to wonder, okay, who's your 15th? Who's your 16th if the Hurricanes have to go that way? Is it, like I said, is it Smith? Is it Robitaille? Is it Suzuki? Is it Josiah Slavin? Who really knows? But likely the Hurricanes' depth is – the team is so deep that you're kind of you feel pretty good about where they're at if they have to go into that route. But, yeah, the injuries are just piling up way too quick, way too early, and hopefully that kind of starts tampering down some as we get a little bit farther into the season. Hopefully we get a lot of these guys back in the Hurricanes and kind of try to get back to their full healthy roster, but only time will tell. Now, like I said, we've talked about all of that, but before we go into the preview, they did ask Jalen Chatfield about the team being banged up and where they're at right now. Chatfield said It shows what kind of team we have. We have guys that stepped up, guys we called up, guys played more minutes. We got a couple of good wins, and we still have a lot to learn, but overall, it was a pretty good trip. And that speaks a lot for the fact that you get an insight from Jalen Chatfield of what the team has done, the fact that they've had to really dig deep in terms of having their depth step up big and a lot of guys stepping up as well. So all that to be said, we talked about the practice lines. We talked about injury updates. Now let's preview the Hurricanes against the Golden Knights. So stick around and we'll talk about that here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score the next 2 fourth-quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making the last push. Like I said, FanDuel could work if you're watching your favorite team or even your fantasy team. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we talked about the Monday's practice lines, got the reactions and thoughts on those, got the injury updates and where the Hurricanes are kind of at right now with all that. Now we move on to the preview of Tuesday night's game against the Hurricanes against the Vegas Golden Knights. It's a frozen frenzy. All 32 games are playing, games are going on. 16 games, 32 teams, all that fun stuff, which starts at 6, where the last game's at 11. But for the Hurricanes, they start at 6:30 p.m. on FanDuel Sports South or on ESPN Plus. Vegas Golden Knights 5-1-3, Hurricanes 6-2. Now, obviously, these two teams met up with each other 8 days ago on October 20th in Las Vegas, where Vegas won 4-1. Score was a little bit closer than what it actually indicates, with the fact that it was some, drive-by screens, deflections, empty netters, stuff like that. But this will be a very interesting game for the Carolina Hurricanes. The tail of the tape says that this game has to play 5-on-5 for the Hurricanes right now, because the Hurricanes are third in the NHL for goals for at 3.75. Vegas is ninth at 3.44. Goals allowed, the Hurricanes are 12th at 2.75, where Vegas is 10th at 2.67. The issue is special teams. Now, penalty kill-wise, both of these teams are 11th and 12th. Carolina in 11th at 83.9. Vegas in 12th at 81.5. The main issue, power play. Vegas is 9th in the NHL at 27.3, where the Carolina Hurricanes are absolutely dead last. They are 2 for 26 or 2 for 29, whatever the number. It doesn't matter. Number stinks. 6.9%, dead last in the NHL. The Hurricanes are right now a great 5-on-5 team. Man advantage-wise, not the greatest. They're the worst. And they've done 5 forwards. They've threw in different guys there. Right now, it's just not working. And it's not, unless you want to win games, you have to score on the power play. And right now, 2 goals in 8 games is not the greatest. So right now, if you're looking at the tail of the tape of what it's saying, Carolina has to keep this to even strength 5-on-5 play, because right now the power play is not clicking for this team. Vegas 6-2-0 in their last, their first 8 games, last 10 games. Vegas is 5-1-3. They've lost the last 2. They've lost in regulation to Florida and lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning in overtime. But that's after winning 4 straight games against Calgary twice, Boston, and of course the Carolina Hurricanes. In terms of the Hurricanes, they are 6-2-0 in their last 8. Obviously, the fact that their last game they lost to against Dallas, but they wanted to shoot against Colorado and then losing to Vegas. Before that, they were on a 5-game heater to start the season. Now, in terms of Vegas Golden Knights players to watch, Jack Eichel, 16 points, 6 goals. Mitch Marner, 2 goals and 10 points. And, the Dorofeyev, this guy has been absolutely on it for Vegas. 7 goals, 8 points in 9 games. And, of course, Yeah, 7 goals and 8 points in 9 games. And of course, Ivan Barbashev, 3 goals, 8 points in 9 games. Definitely got to keep an eye on those guys. In terms of the Hurricanes, obviously makes sense. Seth Jarvis, 7 goals, 11 points. Sebastian Aho, 4 goals, 10 points. Aho on an 8-game point streak, and the fact that you also got Nikolai Ehlers who's on a 3-game point streak as well, all assists. Jackson Blake playing very well for the Hurricanes to start the season. 2 goals, 6 points in 8 games. Taylor Hall, 2 goals, 5 points. And then finishing out that second line, Logan Stankoven, 2 goals, 4 points. So your entire second line is third, or is they are right now 4th, 5th, and 6th in terms of points. And of course, Shane Gostisbehere, if he is back, is 3rd on the team in points. And you would love to have him back. 1 goal, 7 points in this first 5 games, is carrying a +9. Alexander Nikishin carrying a +8, which I'd love to see. Going back to Mike Riley real quick, how about in 6 games, +5 to start the season? Very sneaky season for Mike Riley, but it'll be very interesting to see how the Hurricanes come out in terms of this one. The goaltending matchups, I would probably think that if you're the Hurricanes, you're going to see Frederik Andersen playing 4-1-0 at the start of the season, 2.72 goals against, a 901 save percentage. And then, of course, in terms of Vegas, obviously the last time the Hurricanes played these two teams, Inhill started, Nick Kiersmith finished the game. It could go either way, but I think the Vegas might be going with the Kiersmith, 4-1, a 2.67 goals against, and an 896 save percentage. But it could be Aiden Hill back in the crease. Who knows? But I think for me, I think it's going to be a Kiersmith more than anything else. But it'll be very interesting to see how the Carolina Hurricanes do on Tuesday night against Vegas after being gone for essentially 2 weeks. You know, it's your first game back home in Lenovo Center following the North Carolina State Fair road trip. You know the arena is going to be very loud, and the hope is that they get to defend home ice against Vegas. So only time will tell come Tuesday. But like I said, 6:30 p.m. start time, FanDuel Sports South. If you're able to watch that on there. If you are out of market, obviously ESPN Plus, and of course the 99.9 The Fan. If you want to listen to Mike and Strip on the radio, if you can't catch the game live. But it should be very interesting. This does end the season series against both teams, and you hope that you kind of rewrite the narrative from the first game where you lose 4-1, and you can at least split the season series. So it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. But overall, it's good to see the Hurricanes back home after being gone for 2 weeks, and now you get to face you kind of get to finish this insane gauntlet of Vegas, Colorado, Dallas, Vegas in the last 4 games. But hopefully they get back in the win column. Hopefully you see this team being 3-0 at home and hopefully being 7-2 to start the season before they play their last game in October on Thursday against the New York Islanders. But only time will tell. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting. But at least, like I said, they're back home, and we'll see how the game plays out from there. Like I said, 6:30 puck drop on a crazy, frozen frenzy where all 32 teams are playing in 16 games. But, guys, this will wrap up the Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first and your second listen. Check out Locked On NHL Game Night, wherever game every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube, where you're listening to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me and my one true Zach on X, the podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where if you click the link trees on my bios, you can find all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. Have been putting out a lot of stuff recently, so make sure to keep an eye out at thehockeywriters.com or on my socials if you want to get the links for those. If you want to check out my other podcasts, it's the Surgecast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with all our Caniacs to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Tuesday. Have fun watching your Carolina Hurricanes take on the Vegas Golden Knights on Tuesday night. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.